And I want to talk a little bit about bankruptcy because I got a couple comments and people were asking. So let's go to the next chart. This is total bankruptcy filings for the years ending June 30th. So this takes you back 5 years. So if you're watching, you can see the chart. And if you're listening, I'm going to take you through it. It shows that from 2019 to 2023, let's start with Chapter 7 bankruptcies. Chapter 7 is personal bankruptcy, and the personal bankruptcy is when there's no hope of you paying your debts. And by the way, 60% of personal bankruptcies in the United States of America over the last 3 years are for people that make less than $30,000 a year. Now, when you take a bankruptcy filing to court, the court does what's called a means testing. Do you really have the means to pay your debts, but they need to be spread out and your credit card limits need to come down so you can't be a damn fool? Sometimes that's what the court says. But a Chapter 7 bankruptcy says there is no hope of you paying this off. Let me give you an example. You had limited health insurance and you suffered a horrible injury and it's not covered by workers' comp. It was a sports injury. And you've got $30,000, $40,000 of medical expenses to repair your leg. Well, you make 30 grand a year. That's a full year's salary. It would take you 10 to 15 years to probably pay that off at that rate. So under Chapter 7 bankruptcy, they will probably limit that down to $3,000, $4,000 or wipe it out. Chapter 7 is known as no hope bankruptcy for consumers. And it was 475,000 in 2019, 436,000 in 2020. That was when we went into COVID and people weren't working and they went home and they were furloughed. It wasn't just work from home, it was sit from home. Well, guess what? When the economy got good, 2022, Chapter 7 no hope bankruptcies was 239,000. This year, it's still 239,000, which means no hope bankruptcies in the United States have leveled off. But then you go to Chapter 13. Chapter 13 says, when the court says, nope, you can't file Chapter 7, we're not going to wipe out these debts. Chapter 13 for personal bankruptcies, personal, means you've got the ability to pay because you've got a good job, but we need to stretch this out. And maybe we'll trim down the balances a little bit, but you need to stretch this out and you need to turn down your credit card spending, maybe sell the car with the big payment and get something else. You need to take action. So Chapter 13 is you're in a payment plan, you're with a debt counselor, and the court may say, no, you can't find, nope, sorry. Your means, the means test, you have the means to pay, is high enough that you need to be paying some of this off, but you got to stop spending like a damn fool and take action here. Well, Chapter 13, there was 290,000 of them in 2019, 237 it dropped in 2020, and 118,000 it dropped in 21. So in other words, the bankruptcies dropped going into COVID. But look what happened. 2022, the market was good, but Chapter 13 bankruptcies, in other words, restructurings and a little bit of cancellation of debt for people that have the means to pay according to a plan, popped up to 136,000 in 2023, and we're not even done. It's 173,000. So the bankruptcies have been level over 2 years for people that have no hope. They have medical or a problem, whatever it is, and they don't make a lot of money. 60% of them, $30,000 or less on annual income. But Chapter 13s are coming up. So what it says that there's a little shift starting to happen in the economy. Now you got to remember there's 330 million people in the United States of America. And when you look at these filings, this can seem like a lot, but this is usually the filings. The number of petitions to court is bigger, but a lot of times people are sent out of court to go get a credit counseling service and work on it. And I've heard that the ratio is 3 or 4 to 1. So there could be as many as 1 million filings that go to court. However, some of those get pulled back and they're told, hey, you know what? We're not going to cancel any of your debts under bankruptcy. You need to go get a credit counselor. And again, don't spend like a damn fool. Well, let's talk about a couple things on personal bankruptcies. Personal bankruptcy filings are also down for another reason. Student loans are not dischargeable. You cannot discharge a student loan debt in bankruptcy. You also cannot discharge alimony or child support, or if part of your child support, there was a $300 payment for a car that your ex-wife, ex-husband, whatever it is, has to take kids back and forth to school. They need a vehicle. You don't owe them a Cadillac, but there is some reasonable payment for a reasonable car so they can have transportation needs met. Guess what? You can't cancel that either. And medical is getting harder to cancel. Credit cards are getting harder to cancel because there's a lot of lobbying going on. There's a lot of push. There's also the fraud statute. The fraud statute is if you've run up credit card within 90 days of filing for bankruptcy, the court can turn around and charge you with fraud, because that's called a fraud. So they, I'm going to file for bankruptcy in a month, so you get another credit card, high interest rate, put 10 grand on it. I'm going to file for bankruptcy. They will look at that and go, wait a minute, you played your way into this? Sorry, that will not be discharged. So there's a lot of things that won't be discharged. Now, medical bills up to a point for low-income people are dischargeable. Utility bills, personal loans, back rent, telephone, a deficiency balance on a repossession. Your car gets repossessed. You owe $8 grand on the car. They auction it off for $7,000. That $1,000 difference between what you owe in the bank and what they sold it at auction is called the deficiency balance. Those can even be discharged. So bankruptcy does work for that. But the question a lot of people are asking, why do businesses have it so good? Well, businesses have what's called Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And so it's like this week, and I'm about to do the case study on this, we saw WeWork files for bankruptcy. And everybody goes, ha ha. And you see, WeWork succumbs to bankruptcy. I saw that headline in a business publication. WeWork hasn't succumbed to anything. It's like saying, my dear sweet, relatives succumbed to cancer and passed away. That's not the way bankruptcy works. Chapter 11 bankruptcy, those laws for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which is for corporations, those laws have been determined by lobbyists. Lobbyists are looking for favorable terms for companies that go to bankruptcy. They can break leases. They can have loans wiped out, debt wiped out, and then they do what's called emerging from bankruptcy, and they go off onto the future. Consumers don't have that benefit. If a consumer files Chapter 11 no hope bankruptcy, guess what? 10 years on your credit report, and you're probably going to have a little tiny credit card that's attached to your checking account. So a debit card, also known as a refill credit card, where maybe you save some money and you put a few more $100s on it. That's the balance. But for 10 years, if you filed a no hope bankruptcy under Chapter 7, you're really in a tough spot. Now, if you file Chapter 13, it's 7 years. So 10 years, 7 years. Whereas companies, they can emerge from bankruptcy in as little as a year. They file for bankruptcy, they go to court, they wipe out a bunch of debts because they've lobbied for the laws. But the courts are also trying to keep a company in business because it's paying employees and it's part of the local economy. So there's a benefit to helping a company restructure and get to the other side. But the benefits and the things that are available to companies are so much bigger than the benefits that are available for consumers. One of those benefits is connected to the golden rule of debt financing, which is this. If you own the bank, you owe that bank $1 million, you're in trouble. They could take your car, your house, your future earnings, and they will. Now, if you own the bank and you owe that bank $1 billion, they're in trouble. They could squeeze you into nothing. They're not going to get $1 billion back. So that's where companies have the advantage, because the banks quite often, they may write down the $1 billion to 700 million, but they're going to get something back. So they allow the restructuring, or they allow it to be paid over more years. They're in the business of doing that. It's similar for consumers with credit counseling, but consumers have a tougher time and have a tougher road back from bankruptcy usually than companies do, unless the companies eventually fall to bankruptcy and auction everything off, and then the banks and everybody else, are just completely screwed, as well as the people that work there.